Alright everyone, so we just got another all-time great One Piece chapter. Elbaf really has been chock full of these, and it seems like with this chapter, a major theory was just confirmed that I've been talking about for some time. You can go back and check one of the recent videos, is Imu having the Sea Devil fruit. And from the looks of what we got this chapter, it does appear that Imu's Zoan form does allow him to turn into what seems to be the Devil. Now, are we going to get the clarification that it is in fact the Sea Devil that was talked about early in One Piece by Shanks? Well, you can go check out the Sea Devil Fruit Theory video to see why a lot of evidence of all of Imu's powers and general foreshadowing seems to suggest that that could be the specific type of devil fruit that Imu has. But at the very least, we got it 50% confirmed that Imu's power is that of the devil. Whether or not it is the Sea Devil to be exact remains to be seen. But everything about that, of course, tracks. Imu is supposed to represent this god-complex figure who pretends to be God when in fact he is basically the devil incarnate. But regardless of what Imu's specific ability is, this chapter was a phenomenal introduction for him unveiling his Zoan form. Obviously, we've known Imu for some time, we've seen the character plenty of times in the story at this point, so it feels weird to call this an introduction chapter, but you could view it as the introduction to the true Imu, the man behind the shadow. That is, if he even is a man, he may actually be a Lunarian, as many speculate. I am personally caught between whether or not he is a Lunarian or just a man, because while his visual features do appear to be those of a Lunarian, we have to keep in mind that it appears he is in his Zoan form right now, and therefore this may simply be what the Zoan form makes him look like. And this is a very interesting thing to think about, which is that from what we know, Lunarians used to live on top of the Red Line and reign as gods of the world. And we also know that devil fruits are born from people's imaginations. Now let's say these Lunarians were really terrible gods to the people that they ruled over, right? In general in One Piece, usually characters that anoint themselves as gods tend to not be the best, and they tend to cause a lot of suffering for the people underneath them. But first, we are doing a huge spring sale, where you can buy any 2 posters and get 3 free. And I mean any posters, because this month only, we are bringing back all the posters from all of our collections. That's right, you can mix and match any 5 posters from any collection, and when you add them to the cart, 3 of them will automatically be free. And this month only, you can also get the God Trio of posters: Nidhogg, Nika, and Imu, each with their own hidden image inside the poster. If you've been holding off on getting your posters, this spring sale is your chance to get them at a major discount. The spring sale ends in April, and the God Trio posters are going out of production. So get your posters while this spring sale lasts by hitting the link in the description below. So I wonder if in the past what people tended to imagine the devil would look like, or even what God would look like, would resemble a Lunarian. Remember, devil fruits only create what people already imagine. So if people were suffering in the world and the Lunarians were the ones who were causing the suffering, then the collective unconscious would likely imagine the devil to look like a Lunarian. So I'm not saying that is why Imu looks the way that he does, but I do think that that is an interesting concept to think about. After all, as far as we know, Saint Imu Narona does seem to sound like he was one of just 20 other kings from the Void Century, and not necessarily one of the Lunarian race, at least so far. So bottom line, could Imu actually be a Lunarian? Definitely that is very, very possible, but this could also be simply the resulting appearance from his devil fruit form, perhaps because in the past Lunarians were associated with visions of evil. And one more point that suggests that this could be the case is also that Imu seems to be gigantic in this form, similar to possibly an ancient giant. And again, the races that mankind likely feared the most in the past were probably Lunarians, the gods of the world, and ancient giants, the most violent race in the world. So when mankind envisions the devil, it's probably based on that sort of imagery, hence why the devil fruit for the devil, or the sea devil, or whatever it may be, ended up making Imu look like this. Just an interesting little pet theory to consider as we delve deeper into Imu's origins. But all that aside, let's break down the lead up to Imu's introduction in itself. So I genuinely think that Oda could not have done this any better. This is one of the grandest, most visually striking, theatrical reveals that Oda could possibly have done. The build-up with the discussion in the Gorosei's room, with us getting to see firsthand the dynamics between the Gorosei and Garling and Imu as they all debate this decision, with all of them of course deferring to him, but pushing back as much as they possibly can against this decision, even knowing full well that Imu could kill them for dissent. That alone hammers in just how drastic of a move it is for Imu himself to decide to go out and fight in person. and the run-through of recent history of all the major modern figures who have slowly been shaping destiny in this direction that's coming down to this major crossroads of fate where Imu is like, no, I need to act myself. I have to do it. That was just a great encapsulation of everything that Oda has built so far with this insanely ambitious epic that is absolutely knocking it out of the park right now in this home stretch. And I mean, you cannot say enough about how well Oda is doing with Elbaf right now. This is easily, with this chapter, I think, on a clear trajectory to become my favorite arc post-time skip. I mean, it's got maybe the best side character in One Piece in Loki, one of the all-time great flashbacks in God Valley, and we are getting Imu himself coming down to fight the heroes straight up way earlier than anyone could have expected. I mean, if you had told somebody before Elbaf started that we would be getting the God Valley flashback here in this arc and it would not even be close to the main event of the storyline, nobody would have believed you. It would be like, how is that even possible? And yet here we are. And I love that Oda devotes the entire second half of the chapter to just build up to Imu's arrival. Like, there is no need to rush this. There is no need to turn it into a chapter with a bunch of different scenes going on. Just devote the pages and panel space to crafting one of the all-time great moments in One Piece. I love how it felt very reminiscent of the Gorosei's arrival, but ratcheted up tenfold, where we've got this huge pillar of black smoke coming up, but then 5 pillars of black smoke, and then this gigantic pentagram, and the houses are coming alive, and the environment is coming to life, and turning into this dark, nightmarish, coming together to form this sort of combination nightmarish twist on both Tatoland and Thriller Bark wrapped into one. And the reaction shots are so good here. You want to see the characters feeling the weight of what is about to come. This chapter just dramatically changed the entire atmosphere and tone of Elbaf exactly as needed. Because I would argue that right now Elbaf needed 2 things. The setup of the arc was great, the flashback was great, the character writing has been good so far, the lore, the reveals, all of that. And Elbaf had even hit a decent low point, but it just felt as though it was all being resolved a little bit too easily. And I was getting worried there because even though characters in Elbaf were talking about how it's all going so easily, well, Oda had done the exact same thing in Wano during the raid, where he had characters constantly talking about how everything's going so well and so easy. And then that pretty much just never changed. The protagonist said, I can't imagine us losing, and everyone was like, yeah, I can't imagine us losing, and then they went on to check off all the boxes till all the bad guys were done and the conflict was resolved. We never really got that tone shift that the raid desperately needed. And so I was worried when characters in Elbaf were starting to talk about how, you know, we had this seemingly really difficult conflict, but it's been resolved really easily. Should we all just pat ourselves on the back? I was like, well, Oda's done this before, and this could genuinely just be the end of the arc. But I held out hope, as you saw with the latest video, and Oda absolutely delivered. This was the hard tone shift that Elbaf desperately needed. Imu's arrival just completely changed the atmosphere, the level of tension that the protagonists are about to feel. This is peak One Piece writing. Now, of course, we do have to go on to see what Imu actually does here, and we're in this beautiful spot where the outcome of the arc is completely up in the air, because we know that Imu can't be permanently defeated right here, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily feel like Elbaf is an arc where the protagonists are just supposed to suffer some crushing defeat. So the direction that this story can go is just completely unpredictable right now. And I think that that is when One Piece is at its absolute best. Now, the second thing that the Elbaf arc really needed was to just step up Imu as a villain in general. Because frankly, Usopp was right. Yes, Imu controls everything and he's the one pulling the strings, but at the same time, he's not really fighting himself. And when he has fought so far, he hasn't really been that effective outside of using Dami Reversi. He's been impossible to actually damage, yes, but it kind of felt like if Dami Reversi didn't work, then Imu had no other real offensive ability. I mean, it's entirely possible, based on what Loki said, that if Imu couldn't teleport back home, that he may have just gotten one-shotted essentially by Ragnar and would not have been able to get out of the ice. And it's not just Imu's overall strength and effectiveness, it was also kind of the persona that was beginning to develop around Imu, which is that he seemed a little bit whiny and easily upset. Like, characters like Usopp shouldn't be triggering you. I feel like we needed to feel a little bit more of an intimidation factor with Imu, not just as the boss of Elbaf, but potentially the final boss of the entire series. And this chapter just revamped Imu's image completely in that department. The visuals do matter, they just do. So having a really cool and badass design like that changes how we view Imu. But also the decisiveness that he showed at the beginning of the chapter and that sort of strength of will does affect how I see him as well. That he demonstrated upon his arrival does make me really excited to see how he can fight when he actually wants to get his hands dirty himself. I think Imu has just amazing potential as a final villain. Whether or not he will be the final villain, him or Blackbeard, is still up in the air, but I think Imu's potential as a villain in general is still really high, regardless of whether or not he ends up being the last one. And I have a full video coming Tuesday breaking down how Imu could really join that pantheon of all-time great anime and manga villains, like an Aizen, like a Madara, and so on. And lastly, we have an interesting observation from the Voice of the People, my top tier of patrons. So X7 Strife said that Ragnar being the only one capable of undoing his ice might be a hint that it was him who froze the ancient giants and that it might be Loki's task to unfreeze them. This might be further foreshadowed by the fact that the dragons on Punk Hazard clearly are based on the Nidhogg design. Yeah, so a lot of people have been talking about the connections between Punk Hazard and the revelations that we're getting in Elbaf. I also believe that the Galila giants are the ones who are at Punk Hazard, and yes, they were frozen by Ragnar. I mean, it's even talked about when they're first referenced, which is like, who could have captured and frozen them? And Ragnar's ice was basically just confirmed this chapter as being the one sort of everlasting ice that exists in the One Piece world. So I feel kind of bad, RIP to both Enel and Aokiji now, in that their specialties of lightning and freezing have basically just been strictly outclassed by two clearly far more powerful fruits. It is what it is, power creep just happened. I also agree that a lot of the foreshadowing in Punk Hazard was already there, with the attempts to create a dragon that looks a lot like the Nidhogg dragon, not like the Easter dragon that we see with Kaido, and the many experiments to try to create giants, with it being shown silhouettes of ancient giants, not just normal giants. And I think I might even buy the theory now that Onigashima was actually once at the center of Punk Hazard, and that is where the hole was created at the center of the island, in that Kaido may have come, picked up Onigashima, and taken it over to Wano. And so yet again, even more things are coming together with all of these crazy Elbaf reveals. With that, I'm giving this chapter an easy 10 out of 10, and I will talk to you all later.